Good morning, everybody. Got off to a late start this morning. Slept in. Thanks be to God. But you didn't see the sun rising. The sun beat me this morning. Normally I don't use an alarm clock. And I'm always awake. And I must have fallen off quickly to sleep last night. And thanks be to God, had a good night's sleep. That's worth a lot always. I thought since I'm here right now at our house just to show you the pomegranates coming along. Still some flowers and some little ones and some bigger ones. And I don't know if these are, oh no, there are some bigger ones still. Look at these down here. And there's some bigger ones inside here. Let me get around to see them. It's a small little tree, you know. See, those are some big ones there. Somebody gave me some bags to cover them. I realize I need to be doing that now. So it's good that we stop by here. Interesting how they come along at different times, like the kids in a family. And the pomelos are coming along. For those of you who don't know them, they become very big. They go as big as footballs, almost as big as a soccer ball. I'm not sure, they're not that big, but almost. Right now they're just about, I'd say, maybe a fifth or a sixth of their size, and they're pretty big, you know. So they're already bigger. They're as big as a big orange, but they'll get a lot bigger. Some people say they're the largest citrus fruit that exists on the planet. And lots of them, again, the bounty of nature. And here, this is an orange tree, but yeah, I don't see many fruit at all. I wonder what went on here. Strange. It needs a pruning. Oh yes, there's one fruit in here. That's very strange. I hadn't noticed this, so thank you for bringing me here this morning. Very few oranges. I wonder if they're going to still come. I doubt it, because these ones are quite far along. And this is another orange tree. A different type. The skin is much tighter here on the orange. And these are, what are these? These are mandarins. They're delicious and they're bountiful this year, thanks be to God. Father Arturo was wonderful to plant these when he was here about, how long ago? Yeah, about 8 years ago. So there's a very good crop here. And here's a fig tree. Lots of figs coming. You remember Nathaniel was under a fig tree when, after Jesus called him, he was surprised about Jesus and how much he knew about him. And Jesus said, before I knew you, before you were under the fig tree, I think it was. You'll have to be patient with my memory this morning. It's cranking up a little bit. And this one has a small little fruit, it's something like a plum, but it's different. I'm just checking if there are fruit coming. I don't see the fruit yet. But these are just leaves. Oh no, this are the ones with those little fruit. And I don't see many fruit here either. Interesting. With lots of figs for sure. And lemons as well. These are lemon trees. It's an old lemon, I think, is it? Yeah, because here are the little ones coming along. Just for size relationship. Tiny. Hang on, these ones are bigger. And there are lots of them. Lots of little ones as well. And there you can see the moon. Where's the moon? Yeah. It's there in the center of the screen. It's about a half moon now, waning. This looks like another little fig tree, is it? Or is it a weed? I think it's a weed. You have some of those plants that look like fig trees, but they're weeds. And this is a lemon tree that was very bushy, and all the stems were coming out at the ground level, so there was an expert who said we should cut them all and leave the strongest one and train it to go up. So we have this metal stake here training it to go up upright. So it's growing pretty well. I'm not sure if it's the strings are not taut, so that means then it's basically standing straight by itself now. So we did that probably back in January, February. Imagine January. Wonderful. So there we had some olives here. These aren't our best olives, but they're coming along. So let's go for a little stroll. The lake is incredibly quiet, almost like a sheet of glass. So our first reading today, and we're back with Abraham again. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. The marvels of God's intervention. God is the source of life. So here's the pathway finally finished here. That this little detail was just finished yesterday. So the last thing that I didn't film that happened last week was they ran a vibrating machine on this, put some fine sand over it and ran a vibrating machine to settle these little bricks. So now it looks very nice. It's a big space. So all we need to do now is wait for the people to come back, the pilgrims, but also local families here have celebrations, weddings and different things, so they can have gathering here. You know, there's no rain between April and November here normally, only by exception, so a lot of events can be outdoor and gatherings. And the groups are beginning to come back. There are a couple more groups signed up this week. We still have the nice flow of groups from around the country here visiting, but we have already some groups have come to visit the site from overseas, and some more are still coming. So you may know that Israel reintroduced an obligation to wear masks indoor because some people irresponsibly came without any precautions and any quarantine. And it was amazing how they were able to trace the spread of cases. Again, quite a sudden rise of cases. But thanks be to God, that's been relatively contained, and the obligation to do masks indoor was renewed. So it just shows us how fragile everything is and how we need to be responsible for each other. Am I my brother's keeper? So we need to take care of each other. Life is a fragile gift. So the readings today offer us two scenes that are very difficult and show the limits of the human heart. And God is the fountain of life in every way, not just that a child is born, that there's that fruitfulness, that natural fruitfulness of nature, that a child is conceived and brought to term and born alive and healthy, but also in our own spirit and heart. A fruitfulness, a response of love, a response of goodness is quite a challenge for most of us many times, to respond generously. And right across the lake, although it's incredibly hazy right now as the sun is rising, we have the place called Kursi, which is the place that the memory of the driving out of the demons from the possessed man of Gerasa into this herd of swine and down the slope into the lake. And there's actually a very famous archaeological site there, a Byzantine monastery, that remembered this miracle. So for a long time, this gospel scene has been remembered there. And after this good deed that Jesus did, there's also a very, from the point of view of a believer, an incomprehensible desire that they express to Jesus. They say, "Can you leave our territory? We don't want you here." And the first reading with Abraham and Sarah is also very difficult, because Isaac is growing up and he's playing with Ishmael, the daughter of the slave woman. And Sarah is stirred in her heart and asks Abraham to drive away Ishmael and the slave woman, the slave mother. It's difficult for us human beings dealing with each other, making room for each other. And a lot of pain is caused. And especially when we take things into our own hands. and try to put our own solutions that look like solutions. And so Sarah had said to Abraham, well, take the slave woman and have a child with her, because I'm the cause of the problem. And Ishmael was born. And now that human solution becomes a big problem. The ability to wait for God to fulfill his plans in our lives. The need for great prayer and purification of the heart. Then we have Christ bringing salvation to this man who was possessed by demons. But other people prefer to keep Jesus away because the order he brings into life upsets their economy, their choices, human compromises. And the thing is, we don't live in heaven. We live in a world where people are imperfect, very imperfect, sometimes very unjust. And in a way, we all have suffered some forms of injustice, of selfishness. Think of children in a family and there's a fight over a toy, and the parents have to bring some order, and almost everybody loses out in a way at that moment. But there's also a maturing that takes place, and the ability to live and accept some measures of injustice and suffering. Imagine spouses. Maybe a partner is given to alcohol and the spouse wants to intervene, but it's not easy. There are issues of anger, conditions that are imposed. It can be very rough. And we're living in this kind of world where we're not living with angels. And there's a lot of suffering that ensues from selfishness, from violence, from imposition of will, one over the other, and siblings, spouses, generations, parents, children, parents, grandparents, sometimes pushed to the side under the motto, life goes on. And so there's a great deal of injustice and suffering that's also inflicted by us, and consequences are borne by us. Imagine Jesus coming, all he could do for more people over there, and they said, leave this area, we don't want you around here. And the great contribution that some people are called to make by bearing injustice. And it grieved Abraham's heart to have to send away Ishmael and his mother, with whom Abraham conceived and generated that child. And yet in prayer and discernment, God tells him, go ahead, this is the only way now to have the practical situation. We cannot force another solution at this moment. We have that famous line, I think I've mentioned it a few times. My dad used to quote it very often. Man's inhumanity to man makes countless thousands mourn. And at that point, what do we do? And I suggest to you that we turn to the psalm we have today. The Lord hears the cry of the poor. When I was doing my internship in Michigan, I remember in one school, I think it was St. Regis, and there was a parent-teacher conference, and I remember the principal, Mrs. Stark. I wonder if she's still alive. She was probably, I'm not sure, I don't want to say anything, but she was quite a mature lady when I was there as a young intern, having finished my philosophy degree and working with those kids, 7th and 8th graders. And she said to the parents, God does not have any grandchildren. Every one of us is a child of God. And he knows our tears. And in another psalm it says, God gathers up our tears in his bottle. That was a custom. They used to have tear bottles here. We even found some here in our excavations. They're small little, tiny little vases, not much bigger than a part of your finger. And they would gather the tears at bereavement, for example. And I think sometimes they were buried with the people. I don't know if they kept them, but they were kept in those little vases, small, tiny, minute vases. And the thought that God gathers up our tears in his bottle. And God accepted the logic of all this human suffering by sharing in our human nature. And Joseph had to accept the injustice of Herod and say, okay, well, I'm going to Egypt with Mary and the child. I'm not going to stand up against Herod. This is not the time for that. The transformation of the evildoers and the redemption of their hearts will even go to the point of Calvary. Father, take this chalice away from me, but not my will, thy will be done. So here we're dealing not with the mystery of the suffering in the cosmos that's caused by storms and landslides and tsunamis, but the mystery of suffering that's caused by the smallness of our human hearts, the inability to wait for God's blessings, our sluggishness of heart, our lack of generosity. And we turn back again to that psalm. The Lord hears the cry of the poor, because God's heart responds. Maybe he doesn't respond in a way that pleases us immediately. He responds in a different way, in a way that gives us strength to continue, to provide that surprise well, so Ishmael's mom can get some water and take them out of that moment of need. So maybe one of the great gifts we can ask for today is a greater growth in patience, to be patient. Patient means patira is to suffer. And the person who is patient is a person who's able to suffer different things. To suffer the upset of a person who is very difficult at this moment, and to be patient with a very elderly parent or grandparent, to be patient with a little child that's kicking and screaming. It's marvelous to see parents dealing with a little child that's kicking and screaming, and they're changing the little clothes for the little baby and giving some food, and then the baby is quiet and happy and there's a smile. And the parents know the limits of the baby. And we're all, in a way, little babies and a little bit, how would you say, what's the nice word to say that nowadays? We're challenged. We're challenged in many areas. The goodness and patience of teachers with children with a difficult classroom, with kids coming from difficult homes. My niece is a great teacher with very challenged children coming from impoverished backgrounds and broken families, situations of immigrants. And so to grow a heart that's in the dimensions of God's heart, with the elasticity of God's heart, that makes space for the other who's deeply hurting. How much our world needs this. If the Lord hears the cry of the poor, so can we. And also the spiritually poor, the ones who turn away Jesus. And Jesus left. Imagine Jesus, the Son of God, who threw out the demons. And he left their area. He gave them time. And with time, people sometimes begin to ponder and reflect and change their heart. How much time God has given each of us to grow to where we are. Maybe we did many foolish things. The time and the patience, and not to force. We can't force a little flower bud to open. We can't force a little flower to become a fruit that's ripe that I can eat now. The Lord hears the cry of the poor. When the poor one called out, the Lord heard, and from all his distress he saved him. So people, today we are conscious in these readings of a lot of the deep wounds in humanity that we have afflicted ourselves. And we can benefit from that help, opening our eyes and our heart for God's intervention, and also to be a blessing for people who are poor, like parents are for a little baby that's screaming, that needs a change of diapers. For people who are filled with anger. For people who are very hurtful in their comments, in their ways. For people who are very rebellious. So there's no shortage of intentions to pray for today. Thank you for being with us here this morning. God bless you. See you later, alligators.